It sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? Taking a tiny trace of DNA and poof, generating the face of a total stranger. For years, that was just science fiction. But what if I told you that science is actually turning this fiction into a fascinating and pretty complex reality? Okay, let's get into it.
So the big question is, can we really do it? I mean, can you actually take a single hair or a tiny drop of blood from a crime scene and build a picture of the person who left it there? That's really the core question we're going to tackle. So can you get a face from just one drop of blood? Well, the answer, surprisingly, is kind of yeah. We're stepping into this new era where this wild idea is actually moving out of the movies and into the real world as a scientific tool. Yeah, what used to be a classic Hollywood trope is now a real emerging technique in forensic science. Turns out, our DNA does way more than just identify us. It's like a blueprint that holds a surprising amount of information about what we look like. And the name for the technique making all this possible? It's called forensic DNA phenotyping.
Okay, so how on earth does this actually work? Well, to really get it, we have to look at the instruction manual itself, the language that's written deep inside our DNA. So forensic DNA phenotyping, what is it really? Well, at its core, it's basically the science of reading a DNA sample to predict what a person looks like, their phenotype. We're talking about things like eye color, hair color, skin tone, and sometimes even some of the general shapes and features of their face. Now, this is where things get really interesting because you have to understand how different this is from the DNA testing we always see on TV, right? Traditional DNA testing is all about matching. It's asking, does this DNA belong to person X? Simple yes or no. But phenotyping, it asks a completely different question. It asks, what might the unknown person who left this DNA look like? So you see, it's not about matching at all. It's all about prediction. So how do they do it? Well, the process is this really cool mix of genetics and, you guessed it, big data. First, scientists pinpoint these specific genetic markers, the little bits of code that are tied to physical traits. Then, they feed that info into these powerful machine learning models. These models crunch the numbers, comparing those markers against huge databases with info from thousands and thousands of faces, and then they generate predictions about what that person might look like. Okay, but this brings us to what is maybe the most important part of this whole conversation. We have to talk about the limits of this technology. And honestly, the best way to wrap your head around it is to think about the difference between a sketch and a photograph. And here's the crucial takeaway. Scientists are super clear about this. The result you get is not a perfect photograph of a person, not even close. What it is a statistical probability. Think of it as a really, really educated guess based on all that data about what someone is likely to look like. Yep, a sketch. That is the absolute best way to think about it. DNA phenotyping gives you a possible sketch, just like a sketch artist would draw from a witness description. It gives you clues, a general likeness, but it is absolutely not the final definitive face. It just gives you a place to start. And that starting point, that's exactly where this technology becomes so powerful in the real world. It's a tool that can literally open up a whole new path when an investigation has hit a dead end. Just look at how this works in practice. Imagine an investigation is completely stalled, no leads, thousands of potential suspects. Then they take a DNA sample from the scene, run the analysis, and the report comes back suggesting the person likely has dark skin, brown eyes, and black hair. All of a sudden, that huge list of suspects gets a lot smaller. It gives investigators a focused direction where just moments before, they had nothing. And that's the key thing to remember. It's an additional tool in the toolbox. It's designed to generate leads, especially when there are no other leads to follow. It is never used to make a positive ID, and it's certainly not the final word in a case. It just points investigators in a new direction. But, like any powerful new technology, this one raises some really important questions. We have to think about how we use it carefully and responsibly. And the concerns here are major. We're talking about the risk of reinforcing social or racial biases. How do we prevent this super sensitive genetic data from being misused? We need clear legal limits and transparency. And of course, how do we make sure we're protecting individual data privacy? These are the tough conversations we have to have. What all this really shows us is that fields like biology, data science, and ethics, they're not in separate boxes anymore. They are all deeply interconnected. You just can't have one without thinking about the others. At the end of the day, it really comes down to this. Science shows us the path. But the direction we actually take, that still depends on human decisions. The technology itself is just a tool. It's up to us to decide how to use it wisely.
And that leaves us with a pretty big question, one that goes way beyond just this one piece of tech. So, what is the right balance between all the amazing things technology makes possible and what we as humans decide is the right thing to do?